Alright, so this Knife Thoughts video is going to be a review of this knife. And as you can see, this is a knife from SRM. And SRM stands for Stay Ready for More, but what it is it's the higher end brand from Sanrenmu knives. So if you're not familiar with Sanrenmu knives, it is a budget knife brand or manufacturer from China that a lot of people who are interested in budget knives are familiar with. They make a whole lot of different models at pretty low costs. But SRM is a different brand, it's a newer brand, and the people whom I emailed with made it pretty clear that it is a kind of a separate venture. They have their own sales team, their own marketing team, and their own design team. And I first became aware of these SRM knives because I saw a user on Instagram, Knives and Bikes, posting pictures of them and thought that they looked pretty nice. So I reached out to SRM and they were willing to send this knife for review. So I always like to make that really clear. I didn't purchase this knife. It was sent to me without cost for review. But as always, I try to be objective when I'm carrying and using a knife and getting used to it for review, and take into consideration how I would feel if I had paid the normal price. So here's some information on SRM if you're interested in that. And then this knife itself is model number 9201, specifically the GW version. So let's take a look at it here. It comes in this box, and then the box has a kind of pull out here, and it comes with a little bit of information, some kind of marketing material about a multi-function shovel, and then some of the models that they offer here. And you can see that this one that I have is the top model, the 9201. There's also a plain black uncoated blade version of this knife, which is just the 9201. I have the 9201-GW. They've got a couple other models that are either out now or coming out soon. And I'm interested in some of those also, so hopefully I'll get to check those out. But here is the knife. And the first thing I noticed about this knife when I got it was that it seems to have a good amount of machining into it. And so what I mean by that is, if you take a look at the handle here, it's not just, a plain slab of G10, and that's what it is. It is G10. It has, the normal kind of peel ply texture here on this flat, but then it has this kind of radius machining that gives it a kind of a bolster look to it and a little bit of texture. Then it has kind of, again, a radius here on both sides towards the pivot. And it has kind of another radius here that is for where your thumb goes to open the knife, and then also where your finger is when you're holding it. So all of that, plus then you see the blade does have some swedging and some jimping. And so it seems like a good amount of machining went into this knife. Now, the other thing that I noticed, and the thing that drew me to this knife, is the design itself. So I've seen kind of an interesting trend of knives from China, from these Chinese brands that are trying to establish themselves as not the super low-end, low-budget knives that kind of historically they have been, but moving up into the medium range and such, and even some of them into the high-end range. Is that they've had a lot of these clip points. So just one example, there are other examples, but another one here that I did a review on recently is the Civivi Dogma. So you can see it also has this kind of long sweeping clip point. And I really like that because it's not something that historically you've seen a whole lot of in modern knives. You don't really see clip points as much as drop points or spear points, or even Wharncliffe or sheepfoot style blades. So I like to see these clip points, and I think that this is a good looking clip point and a pretty classic looking design overall. So I do like the look of the design. Clip points are very practical. You get that good tip that's usable, some straight edge, and then a good amount of belly also. And the handle both looks good, I think, and feels good. So I was pleasantly surprised by how this knife feels in the hand. This radius that I talked about makes it so that your index finger really locks in there. The jimping for me is right where my thumb goes. The curve of the butt here with this G10 backspacer with some kind of large jimping on it and a lanyard hole fits in the hand well so that it's not uncomfortable, but it gives you kind of like a brace that you can brace against while you're using the knife. And I've found it to be comfortable in use. I have used this knife a good bit, cutting cardboard and general usage, and haven't really found any hot spots on it. So I do like both the look and the feel of the handle. I also like the look of this finish on the blade. So it's like a black coating, but with a stone wash. You can see it's not a plain flat black like you might see on something like this Benchmade Griptilian, where it's completely black with no texture. This one has that stone wash, and it gives it a good look in my opinion. Not too much branding on this. Speaking of, it has the SRM, stay ready for more, and then the logo version of the SRM here on this side. I believe that that's a serial number. So an interesting thing that they're doing where each knife has a serial number. And then that's the model number. And you can see that this is D2 steel. So G10 handles, D2 steel. And I don't know of them calling this lock anything in particular. I'll go ahead and call it an Axis style lock. The Axis lock patent has expired, so it's up for grabs, and lots of companies are using it. So no issue there with, using this lock, and I'm going to go ahead and just call it an Axis style lock. But it does have that, as well as the D2, the G10. So not bad materials, especially for the price of this knife. So again, I didn't purchase this knife, but it is available on Amazon for $30, actually $29.99. So for $30, you're getting G10 that seems like real G10, D2 steel, an Axis lock, and this has phosphor bronze washers, so you can hopefully see those a little bit in there, right there. It is not a ball bearing pivot, so it's not quite as smooth as something like, so this is a little bit of an unfair comparison, to be honest, because I've had this knife for several years. So it's very broken in, but this is the Benchmade Griptilian, and again, kind of a similar colorway on those two. So if you're familiar with this knife from Benchmade, you'll be familiar with the colors there, but much smoother on the pivot, even though this is also not a bearing knife, but a washer knife. So smoother, but hopefully this knife will continue to break in, because it has gotten smoother since I originally got it. When I originally got it, it really wouldn't do any drop close, and you can see now if you hold it, it will, start to drop close. Just not quite as smooth as the Benchmade, but again, significantly less expensive and significantly less break-in time. As for the rest of the construction, it came pretty much perfectly centered and has stayed that way. It has no blade play. Even when unlocked, there's no side-to-side blade play, which I really like to see. It's not necessary, but I do like to see it. It has nice action. You can see, aside from the smoothness, it does, pull itself closed with that Axis lock and or not Axis lock, Axis style lock, and the Omega style spring. Not Omega spring, but it does pull itself closed, so it does have that preference for closed. And generally seems pretty well put together, especially with all that machining, like I said. So have had no issues with the construction of the knife. The look of the knife is great. The pocket clip is kind of a classic deep carry pocket clip. You can get access to the screws. Carries, you could probably have, what is that, about 1/4 of an inch, maybe like 3/8 of an inch sticking out of your pocket, which I don't mind at all, but some people do like a little bit less than that. It has some nice anodizing around the pivot, which does have that logo again, and it's adjustable, of course. Now, one thing that I think could be a little bit better on this knife, and that is this opening hole. So, the opening hole here is this kind of oblong shape. It's wider towards the tip side, and then a little bit thinner towards the pivot side. And that really, to me, seems like an aesthetic choice. the choice to make it go along with the curve of the handle here. And it does look good, but in my opinion, I think it would work a little bit better if it was a little bit shorter. So when I open this knife, my thumb goes here, and you can see that it kind of slides up. And then because of the length of this opening hole, when I push, my thumb can actually hit that guard area. And so it's just a little weird. So what you have to do is, instead of pushing kind of like this and allowing your thumb to slide up to the end of that opening hole, you kind of have to push out. And then it'll open easily. You know, you can thumb flick it, but because of that, it's a little bit more difficult to middle finger flick it. Not that you really need to do that, but just something where I do think that it would be easier to open if this opening hole was a little shorter, so that if your thumb does drift all the way up to this part of the opening hole, it wouldn't catch on that guard. And hopefully you can see what I'm talking about there. If you allow your thumb to slide up, when you go to open it, it is definitely going to hit that guard. So just something that I think a little bit of a design tweak would have helped with. Speaking of that opening hole though, you can see that it's an interesting kind of stepped machining, stepped down to kind of a center line there. So different than you might see on something like, you know, a Benchmade or Spyderco, where the hole is just kind of straight through. Another comparison here with the Civivi is the Civivi has one kind of chamfer bevel and doesn't come to that center line as much, whereas the SRM does. So a small thing that I think would have improved this design-wise slightly. But I wanted to give you some comparisons here. So the only Sanrenmu knife I have is this. This is a Sanrenmu 4079 SUX-FHK. This was gifted to me by Patty's Potato Peelers, so check out his channel. I really enjoy his channel. And this is a little slip joint knife, so it's not the greatest comparison, but you can see the difference in construction. I certainly really like this knife and really appreciate it from Patty, but just a little bit different, I think, amount of care and detail going into these two knives here. And then again, I'll show you the comparison, the Benchmade Griptilian. And the biggest thing here, although they have similar colors, again, the blade has a stone wash on the SRM. That was my Western Pennsylvania accent coming out there. And the handle is a little bit lighter on the Benchmade. They're similar in their construction. I mean, this has G10 versus a nylon plastic type thing. But with the opening hole and the Axis style lock, they do have some similarities. But then I'll show you again the Civivi Dogma. So similar more so in design than in construction. This one is a liner lock flipper versus a Axis style opening hole. The opening hole on the Civivi is not really functional in my opinion. And then I did want to show you some traditional knives also, because if you watch my channel, you know that I love and use modern knives, but my true kind of passion is traditional knives. And I think that there are some interesting similarities here. These two especially give me a kind of interesting likeness between the two, specifically the clip point and the clip point, and then the color scheme here. And then just to give you kind of the closest traditional clip point that I have to this SRM is a Queen Hunter. So you can see the similarity in blade shape there, although they're not exactly the same. So I have really enjoyed using this knife. One thing that I wanted to mention also is that it does cut relatively well. I hope that you can see that there. It's ground to a relatively thin edge. I haven't measured it, the thickness behind the edge, but it seems to cut well. I have used it for general EDC tasks like cutting boxes open, breaking down cardboard, even food prep, things like that. So it has worked well for all of that. If you like clip points, especially if you're used to using clip points, I think you'll be happy with the design of this knife. So really interesting knife from SRM. I'm interested to see where they kind of place themselves in the market. I hope to get to check out some more of their knives, because they do have some even higher end. So this, you know, as a $30 knife is not high end, but they have some knives coming out that are a little bit higher priced, and I think even more attention to detail and quality construction. So I'm interested in checking those out also. But I've really enjoyed getting to see this knife. And if you are looking for knives in that $20 to $50 range, I think SRM is something to check out. Considering this knife, it seems like they are making the knives nicely. So if they have a design that interests you, I would not hesitate to check it out. In fact, I am hoping, like I said, to check out some of their other designs, and it's nice to see them available, like I said, on Amazon. I haven't seen them at other dealers, at actual knife dealers, but I'm sure they will be at some point. And I think that it's a good thing for the market. Now, of course, there's all kinds of discussions that get into politics and global socioeconomics and stuff. I try to stay away from those. I just like knives, and I think that this is a nice knife for $30. So I want to thank SRM for sending this knife along for review. I have, again, really enjoyed it, and I'm hoping to check out more in the future. If you've enjoyed this video, I always appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel and click the bell so you know when I post new videos. You can also check out my social media at Knife Thoughts on Instagram and Facebook, as well as my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife-related topics. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.